Hola. A ver, voy a poner música. Música de Minecraft. Minecraft 2. Ahora en música. A ver, ¿cuál pongo? ¿Cuál pongo? Esta. Ya está, la he copiado. Ya. Está viendo esta web de Anthony Mueller, Relay After 9 Months, a Critical Update. Así que lo quiero ver. Y aparte quiero comenzar una nueva. Una nueva, ¿cómo se llama? Partida en Factorio. Ya que se viene la expansión, quiero jugar Vanilla. Así que.
Well, thank you very much, dear Hans, dear Gulchin, for the invitation. It's a great pleasure being here, and especially doing a presentation about a mega event. I watch partly the situation from Brazil, where I live, and so many eyes are fixed what's going on, especially in the libertarian community. Will there be a success or failure? And if it should be a success, it will have huge repercussions and for all of Latin America, maybe even for the world. Now, what is a success in this sense? And it is basically a macroeconomic success. From my experience visiting Argentina several times, actually since the 1990s, what always amazed me in Argentina was the microsphere works very well. So you have countries which you visit and you notice right away, well, you can fix the macroeconomics, but if the microeconomics does not work, forget it. But in Argentina, if you get the macroeconomics right, the micro is already there. The small companies, the business people, trust fear, as we have heard, and so on. The intelligence, it's all very present in Argentina. So it actually should be not too hard a task to see this experiment of an anarcho-capitalist, at least the self-declared anarcho-capitalist, taking over not a small country. By size, it's pretty large. It also has an impressive history, but somewhat it is paradoxical, yes, particularly if you see the person himself. So like in the US, they always want to know how's his family. And though we have here his family with Murray, Milton, and Robert and Lucas. And Robert Lucas is one person, so one dog.
Acá se están riendo de mi ley. En la PFA's Property and Freedom Society. Santi Miura está hablando de que en Argentina, bueno, ustedes deben entender inglés. Está hablando de que Argentina, bueno, es muy fácil mejorar la economía argentina porque microeconómicamente ya tienen los negocios, lo único que tiene que hacer es un trabajo macroeconómico en el cual es bastante fácil, o sea, no es difícil. Así que esas críticas que de repente tiran algunos, por ejemplo, algunos están diciendo que Hoppe no es economista. Hoppe sí es economista, no pueden decir que Hoppe no es economista y para poder desmerecer la crítica a Milei, pero bueno, ya sigamos viendo.
It's called Robert, the other is called Lucas, which is a neoclassical macroeconomist who is said to have formally crashed neo-Keynesianism. Yeah. Well, the Austrian did it very long time before, but that is his reputation. But let's go on and, as Hans asked me, do some kind of interim report, 9 months in power, 9 months in power. And so I looked at the data. I tried to get the most recent data. And at first I made some kind of balance. First, starting with the positive side, in the sense of having macroeconomic success, yes, because this will be the main point. The libertarian side is very problematic and would require an extra talk. But if he has macroeconomic success, this will have the impact, at least for all of Latin America. And what is macroeconomic success? Very, very simple. You have high inflation that you have to bring down, but not with high unemployment. I mean, this is the trade-off. Yeah, it's not just the so-called Phillips curve, but this is the task presented to him. Put it very simple, you have to bring down the inflation rate. How do you bring down the inflation rate? Cutting the budget deficit, okay. And now you cut public spending, which in the case of Argentina increases unemployment, and this causes social problems. Now the trick is, so to speak, and I've always said that, when does so-called austerity works? It works when you have private sector coming in. So you move down the public sector and in moves the private sector. So this would be, in very simple terms, the model to follow. Well, and he started quite well on this way. We have a budget surplus in Argentina since January. Yeah, I mean, he came to power in December, and already in January there was a budget deficit. Behind the inflation is the central bank, and he managed a central bank sheet reduction, a very important step, and he did it technically quite well, I have to say. And the first results have shown up with a reduction of the inflation rate, which came down in April already and continues to have a kind of disinflation. Inflation is still rampant, but the rate of growth is falling. And he has done the other part. Get the private sector jump in to compensate for the cuts of government. And he abolished various price regulations, including the residential market. And there were also a reduction of price subsidies. And his biggest feat, hard measure, if you imagine something like that being done in some kind of European country, abolition of 8 ministries, and in some cases complete closure of it, and a dismissal of around 30,000 state employees. So this is really, in such a short time, a big thing. Now look, the balance, let's have a look at the negatives that are still here. The minus side, price inflation is still rampant. On a year-on-year basis, it's still 237%. That is still very, very tough. On a month-to-month basis, so monthly inflation rate, it is still 4.2%. So inflation is still here. Unemployment is on the rise. It's 7.6% in the second quarter of this year. the labor force participation. That's really a strange figure that I found, yeah? Just to give you an idea, in most European countries, we have labor participation rates of around 70%. That means how many persons in the workable, who theoretically are able to work, to really go after business and activities. Yeah, it's extremely low. There are many reasons from that. In Europe, usually which lifts the labor participation.
Bueno, esto se da porque, como ahí dice, la gran cantidad de empleo público, obviamente al bajar la intervención del Estado en muchas áreas va a aumentar va a aumentar el desempleo, porque básicamente esa es la ilusión del Estado. Eh, Siempre estuvieron mal, podríamos decir, con un desempleo privado alto, pero con un empleo público superior a la cantidad de empleo que se puede dar en el mundo privado. Entonces, cuando corta el empleo público, sin dar un incentivo real para que entre más empleo privado, va a provocar que aumente el desempleo. La solución era que cree un incentivo para que entre empleo, pero para eso tiene que destruir la moneda. O sea, Jope tiene razón en que tenía que cerrar apenas pudiera el Banco Central y ser intransigente con eso para que se cierre el Banco Central y que el peso argentino muera. Ya que los ahorros y toda la cuestión, bueno, mala suerte. Esos son... Es el... No creo que el argentino ahorre en peso argentino, porque a muchos están diciendo, no, pero los ahorros en peso argentino, ¿la gente de verdad ahorra en Argentina? Primero, ¿puede ahorrar? Segundo, ¿ahorra? Y si ahorra, ¿ahorra en peso argentino? Esa es la cuestión. Y primero, podría ir, ya digamos que va poco a poco. Entonces, lo primero que tendría que hacer es permitir que la gente quitar lo que es el cepo, y así la gente todo se pasa al dólar y después cierra el Banco Central y muere el peso. Y listo, como dice Jope. Y se termina la inflación y podría permitir desde el lado monetario un incentivo para que entre, porque muchos no quieren invertir allá por el tema de la plata, del, de la moneda. Otro incentivo que podría hacerse es quitar las leyes de propiedad intelectual para que eh, cualquier empresa pueda ir y fabricar en Argentina lo que sea. O sea, si está el conocimiento, si tienes la capacidad técnica, tú lo puedes hacer. Solamente tienes que tener un lugar, bajar así como el tema estos de los costes para que se ponga una empresa, o sea, bajar los requisitos. Si, que tú solamente necesites tener un terreno eh, en Argentina, ni siquiera que sea industrial, sino que un terreno, y que tenga las ganas de producir, y listo, ahí hace que sea mucho más competitivo que Chile, Perú, el resto de toda Latinoamérica, y así de un rato para otro te llegan un montón de empresas que quieren investigar, y de hecho podrían irse a investigar a tu país, para invertir digo, y podrían irse directamente a investigar a tu país aplicando métodos que están protegidos por patentes para derivarlos en otros métodos y aplicarlo en otros países. Fácilmente podría ser Argentina una potencia en tecnología, una potencia en cuestión, simplemente haciendo eso. No necesita más cosas, o sea, quitar obviamente estos trabajos no, en ese aspecto, creando este incentivo, no, incluso se vería mejor, ¿ya? Tendría mayor recibimiento, porque ahora lo que crea es que la gente se tire para atrás por el tema este de que está dejando desempleado a un montón de personas que dependen del Estado. Y podría también privatizar no solamente empresas estatales, sino que funciones del Estado. Por ejemplo, la salud, privatizarla. Todos los hospitales públicos los podría vender. Todo lo que sea público, por ejemplo, IPF, no sé, ya son esas empresas, ministerios, subsecretarías, todo eso lo vende y listo. Y no necesitaría más impuestos. Alguien querría comprar una subsecretaría, así como una empresa, y que eso quede como empresa privada. Entonces, podría hacer eso. De poder se puede. Y podría hasta moverse con gente, así, hablando de poder político, que sea gente poderosa y decir, oye, le voy a prometer, aunque no le cumpla, le voy a prometer a ustedes tal cuestión, si me dan fidelidad y toda la cuestión, yo les voy a prometer tal cosa, así, ya listo, lo puedo hacer. Después, si tiene poder, podría hacer un montón de cosas, no sé, pues matar a todos los hueones, así después, ¿cachai? No necesita mucho. Y eso te libra de muchas cosas, la democracia, otras cuestiones, y llevaría a un país blanco. Ya diciendo ya que tiene el poder, porque si tienes en cuenta que ya tener poder en sí es inmoral. Bueno.
It is the participation of women, yeah? But this could be one of the parts. It could also be that when you have a salary, like a good salary as a state employee, it's neither your kids nor your relatives need to work. Yeah, that's the other thing. So it's interesting to research about that. Now, this is the bad point. The industrial production is still weak. Yeah, as I said, you lower the budget side, the governmental side, and you make austerity, but this will be a disaster if the private sector does not expand to compensate for that. So the industrial production is weak, negative. It has fallen on a year-on-year basis by 5.4%, and month to month, it's still weakening from month to month of 1.6%. Now, the largest, biggest preoccupation from my point of view, I have worked in this area of sovereign debt analysis. The external debt continues to rise. We are now at 290 billion US dollars external debt, and the foreign exchange reserves are falling. Yes. I mean, just imagine you have reserves of 24 and debt of 290. Yeah, so he must get foreign exchange, but at the same time, and he initiated this, Milei initiated this, the currency continues to weaken. It was a managed devaluation, and the managed devaluation continues. So from 322, when he took office, to now, it is from 322 Argentinian pesos to 963. Now, what does that mean? That means that in domestic terms, your foreign debt burden has tripled just because of the exchange rate. Because before I can transfer, I have to bring it up at home. Yeah, so this is the dilemma. I see the major obstacle for success. And let's hope that he will make it work. I think a petition for the IMF will be necessary to get along with that. Now, here I have his official projections of Milei himself when he presented the budget. Normally, the finance minister does it, or the economy minister, but he did it himself, the latest budget that he entered. Now, what does he foresee, or his staff, for next year, as of September 24, for the coming year, budget year? An increase of the gross domestic product of 5%, and a sharp reduction of the inflation rate, to 18%, and a continuation of the exchange rate devaluation, and continue with the primary deficit fiscal surplus. A primary fiscal surplus means that surplus or that balance that is calculated without interest payments. So pretty optimistic. This outlook, let's see what will happen in the coming year. Now, what came as a surprise for many people is that his popularity is still going well, and it actually has increased from July to August. This is this 39 figure on the right side. Well, it is not a majority, but nevertheless, it seems he still has a standing. There's still hope in the population that things will turn out all right. Now, how did it happen that he got elected? And I would say because of frustration. What is the frustration? The misery that the Argentine people had to feel over a long period, and finally they got fed up. And particularly when you make some comparisons. There's a so-called abundancy index, several commodities that are put together, and they measure more or less how easy it is to get access to it. And we see in this group, Argentina is failing. Yeah? So people since 1980 have lost abundancy, have lost well-being in the form of material well-being, of access to goods and services. Yeah? While not just in football, but also in performance, Brazil, the neighbor, the big other country in South America, has gains. Yes, that is just amazing. I mean, our big neighbor, who was always very weak compared to us in the living standards, now is going ahead. And we also see that, of course, China is moving ahead, and India has made some impressive performance as well. So this is frustration. Yeah, after a while, you notice, okay, we are falling behind what's wrong with our, since 1980, yeah. And so the other frustration is that, you know, one gets accustomed to a certain level of inflation, okay, you adapt to that. But when the inflation explodes, you get angry, you lose your orientation, and this has been extreme in Argentina, and particularly in the past couple of years. That's a typical curve that you have for hyperinflations. Yeah, it moves along, it moves up step by step, and suddenly it becomes exponential. And if you don't do anything, the whole system breaks down. And this is the case here. And when we look at the annual core inflation rate, we see that it has risen dramatically over the past 2 years, and that this is already falling. It's still extremely high, but at the end of this chart, that's for July, we see that the annual inflation rate is coming down, but it's still extremely, extremely high. Now, this is the monthly inflation rate, month on month. So you have a very nice picture of what has happened. So month on month, it explodes, yeah, in the 22, 23. And this has come down drastically. So this is a feat, a great deed that has been done. But we also see that in the end, this little trickle, it's already not falling, continue to fall. Yeah, it still remains very high. Important is the inflation expectations, and we see that they have fallen drastically when he took office, but since May, they are no longer falling. So people, in the terms of expectations of the inflation rate, they no longer expect much of a drastic fall. This is some kind of preoccupation that this trust, okay, we are going to 5-6% per year, or even 10% would already be a big thing, is no longer in the expectation. And inflation expectation feed into inflation. I mean, if there are high expectations of an inflation rate, it produces inflation because people want to get rid of their money. Now, the central bank balance sheet. This is also interesting. Yeah, we have this explosion, which is really correlates well with the price index. So we all know that. That's not a surprise. We also see the big cut in the central bank balance sheet, which was a very important management fact that he achieved. But also here at the end, we see this slight upturn again. So will it continue, or was it just one big step? And after that, we're stuck again with the problem. And when we look at the latest figure more clearly, since September of last year, so we see how it rose before he took office, how he slashed it, the central bank's balance sheet, because it's the center, the origin of the money system, yeah, where it's created and then floods into the economy in various ways. And we see the pickup there, yeah, the falling. So, okay, well, let's see. Yeah, it's not all rosy. Now let's go to the government. And here is the greatest achievement. Let me go back. Yeah, here. Okay. Budget value, see full numbers, not relations, in Argentine pesos. And we see that as soon as he took office, he moved out of the deficit into a surplus, yeah, by the means that I mentioned, slashing simply government expenditures, slashing government. Now this has to be seen in connection with employment and production, yeah. As I mentioned, you slash the public sector, and if you slash only the public sector, the economy will contract if there is not a compensating expansion in the private sector. So we have to look at this. And the first thing we notice that the employment rate has shot up, also with the caveat that it has come down in the past couple of years before he took office. So you have this falling unemployment rate, yeah, and then he takes office and it goes up. And if private production does not get in to compensate, we have a problem. And so the industrial production is negative on the year-on-year basis in all, so from 1 month to the year before the same month, the statistics. And we see a deep recession in the industrial production, and when you at the same time have inflation and a reduction of production, it's called stagflation. Yeah, so if you want an etiquette label for what is going on now, it is stagflationary interim situation. And the industrial production, when we see here, okay, there's a big fall in, oops, you do not very much see it here. It has a big fall in March and April. It continued to fall, and only what you see blue, there was this little uptick in April. And in May, June, July, we are already again in negative territory. Now, to conclude, I see the biggest threat from the external side. Yeah, I think in the press, as far as I have read it, it gets rarely mentioned. We know, I once wrote an article, it was in 2020, that Argentina, a tradition of default, yes. And it would be very sad if we would see that again, no? Because when we look at I could show up many more figures, but just basically, one can see it more or less. You just make a line, for the left graph. It goes like that. That is the external debt as it is growing, yes. And on the right side of this graph, you have the reserves that are for.
Como está diciendo Müller, la deuda externa ha aumentado y las reservas de cambio han bajado, lo cual es malo. Lo que se tiene que hacer es quitar la deuda, como dice Jope, no pagarla.
Falling. I mean, this can't go on. Yeah, what can't go on will stop. How to generate the finances, to finance the international debt. Private banking sector, international private banks won't lend any more money as of now because it has this mark of being a defaulter. Argentina is already the biggest debtor of the IMF. So will the IMF jump in? That's another point. And to take this point as a challenge, Milei must be comporting himself in a way to please the IMF. Yeah, so this is really the trap he is in. And so to make matters worse, and I've studied various developing countries as to the debt problem, the sovereign debt analysis. The problem is that on the one hand, so it's a dilemma. On the one hand, you need to devaluate your currency to reduce imports and be more competitive with exports. So you need to devalue. That's one side of the coin. But as much as you devalue, in local currency, your debt increases. And first you have to bring it up nationally, usually when it's a government debt, by taxation. So what is my outlook? Oops, going back again here. Okay, the outlook First, the monetary problem. The monetary aggregate M1, which is a reasonable inflation precursor, yes, and the policy interest rate, which he brought down, or the government brought down, or the central bank brought down to stimulate the economy. That's another dilemma, yeah? You have to stimulate the economy, as I said, to get the private sector going, because you got the budget deficit, yes? And then on the other hand, it will, if you do not lower, if you lower the interest rate to stimulate the private sector, you give room for the money to expand furthermore. So this is my conclusion. Let's watch for inflation. Will it be that the inflation reduction will go on? My data here say that we could be a little bit skeptical to expect that in the coming months. And the other is that will be decisive in January next year, where a huge payment of interest comes due, and how the government will manage that at that time. Well, thank you very much. And if someone would like the slides, I'm happy to send it to you. Just drop me an email and I'll do that. Thank you very much.
Ya, ahí terminó la presentación. Bueno, básicamente lo que dije. Y eso, ahora vamos a ver. Vamos a ver otro. Este es David Tour, cómo abolir el Estado.
So that's why. Again, many thanks for the invitation. And this year, especially combined with this 75th anniversary, and this wonderful T-shirt can also be combined with the tie, you know? So it's also for speakers, it's well prepared, really. Now this subject about Argentina, or about this newly elected president, actually that was not the subject I had the intention to present you today. Actually, I wanted to present a completely different subject. I said it to Hans somewhere earlier this year. I would like to talk about the free will, and that there is no such thing like a free will, but it's very useful that we think the will is free, something like that. And then Hans said, oh, would you really like to bite out your teeth, you know, at such a subject? There is this person there in Argentina. That would be an interesting topic. And I think that at that time, Hans was positive to that. Probably, as we will hear today and already read somewhere, that's changed in the meantime a little bit. So nevertheless, now I think that's a good you know, introduction to this question, to this dilemma one has in such a situation. If you woke up and found yourself president-elect of Argentina, you as anarchists, or let's say very critical people against the state, how would you react in such a situation? This is what I ask myself. For me, president-elect at that time, not yet president, it's this stage, you know, between being elected and accepting the office. An anarchist president-elect of a big state, that's a contradiction.
Acá dice, un anarquista elegido como presidente de un gran estado es una contradicción. Eh, bueno, y trata de que los temas que iba a hablar al principio, de que no la el libre albedrío no existe, y que no existe, pero es muy útil. Bueno, eso ya pajas mentales, imposible decir eso porque él eligió, entonces debe existir. No es una ilusión, así como tratan de decir de que no, es que tú eres condicionado por cuestiones externas, claro, y depende de cuán condicionado tú te dejas ser por esas cuestiones. No es algo que tú no puedes elegir.
And of course, I thought, how would I react in such a situation? Because my intention is for many years already to abolish the state, to get rid of this strange organization. And now, how does a state president abolish the state? That's the question at stake. There are many approaches, I would say, for this question. One approach is just to smash the state. This is what Millet always exclamates, or maybe he did exclamate it during the campaign running for presidency with his chainsaw, is that? Yes, the word. Things like that, so just to demolish and smash the state. Why not? But I think it's easier said than done, and that's why it's at least not the subject of my presentation today. A second approach could be to dismantle the state. I think this is, as I understand it, what Millet is trying to do right now. So one could say the classical approach of privatization, that you take out certain parts of this organization, of this structure, and sell them to investors, so to privatize specific parts. It's very difficult, as he sees now, I think, because for some parts he already has some authorities according to the constitution, he as the president. For others, the parliament must give him this competence. So this is a long and hard work, which is not an objection against it, but it's certainly very difficult. And again, it's not the approach I will present you today. A third approach could be just to neglect the state. He could do this too. Maybe that would have been meant that he did not accept the office. There is a saying, Alexander Raviol told me, is he here? No? Ah, yes, you told me yesterday, there is a saying, we didn't find the precise source, that Ludwig von Mises, once when he had a speech in South America, maybe in Argentina, and then he was asked, Professor Mises, what would you do if you were president of Argentina? And he said, I would resign. Maybe it's not true that he said, but I think it's is it? Is it? Yes. Maybe Guido, he knows the source for that, because he is the author about Mises with all. Well, it's a good story in any event. And that would be this third approach, just not to take it, or maybe to take it pro forma and to neglect this strange organization. It could be consistent with anarchism, but it's passive, it's not, he doesn't take influence. So I think this is not an interesting approach. Now, the approach I would like to present you is this. What about focusing the state, to focus the state? I think this is what Millet should do. I think what I will show you now is consistent with anarchism and is effective. Now you probably are afraid that I am going to tell you that he should focus on core competencies of the state, which is a crazy thing. This is not what I'm going to tell you. Focusing on core competencies, making more efficient, things like that, which sometimes within groups of classical liberals is the approach. This is not the approach I'm going to tell you. By the way, there are no core competencies of the state, except perhaps stealing money from the people, warfaring, bombing streets, things like that. Building streets is not a core competence of the state, but bombing streets, that's their competence. So this is not the focus I want to show you, but something quite different. It's this. It's a certain concept once formulated in 1999 by two Swiss economists that is called functional overlapping competing jurisdictions, abbreviated FOCI. It's an interesting small book here, issued in 1999 with the subtitle The New Democratic Federalism for Europe. The two Swiss economists, Bruno Frey, Rainer Eichenberger, one is somehow older than me, the other is even more younger than me. I know them a bit, not closely, but I know them. And they are very, in the true sense, liberal economists. They are very oriented to free market, things like that. And what they wanted here to develop is something like a political network system, but coming from economic approaches, economic issues. And as the title says, this is the scheme not of one jurisdiction, of course monopolized by the state, but of many jurisdictions overlapping, not territorially fixed, according to certain functions, specialized, and of course by this structure in permanent mutual competition. This is this system, and I thought that could be an interesting approach. And as Wikipedia is the ultimate source of all our truth, even for Sean Gapp, I realized yesterday in your beautiful pictures that your source also is Wikipedia, for me also, of course, and for everybody. And now what is interesting, there you see about this concept, that's a translation from a German Wikipedia article. This rather theoretical concept has not been realized so far. And then comes something. The concept resembles a moderate form of panarchy, whatever panarchy is, and has some common features, some features in common with, and then comes a word that you do not find too often in Wikipedia, and has some features in common with anarcho-capitalism. So why not to take that concept and try to implement in such a situation now we are looking at. A word to the terminology, so that you really see it's not about focusing on state competencies. They call it FOCI, functional overlap, competing jurisdictions, and then they make a singular out of this. It sounds like a Latin plural, and then say one such organization is a focus. And I would say now to focus the state would mean to transform the state into one such focus which will be overlapping and competing with other such foci. That would be the approach. Now let's look at the state and then at this alternative of foci. That's the state. And for me, the question, shall I now, I'm elected, shall I now assume this position here? What we have here is a big variety of functions. These classical functions, legislation, court, money, social welfare, infrastructure, education, health, all these things within the same conglomerate. Then you have the territorial monopoly, which is a very crucial criterion. And because of that, you have no competition. And the membership, so-called, is mandatory. It's a mandatory submission of these people down there. The power is self-declared. It's a presumptuous, arrogant power, not a delegated power. And not by accident, there is a fundamental top-down structure, a coercive and enforcement-oriented approach. And within this system, you see that there are taxes taken from the people. All these duties are mandatory. There are a lot of regulations coercively implemented. So that's the picture of the state, which I hesitate to take over in that function. But now let's look at this alternative. This is the alternative. These are the foci. We have these different whole variety of overlapping, also smaller and bigger pyramids, because
Ahí acá habla, para muestra una cuestión, ay, no lo veo, pero habla de esto de privatizar ciertas cosas, así como, a ver, no lo entiendo, me voy a poner.
the foci. We have these different whole variety of overlapping, also smaller and bigger pyramids, because there too are, decentralized power centers. This DP, I mean delegated power and not self-declared power. In different functions, be it health hospitals, be it in the law with arbitration, things like that, in security, in money, in insurances, all this, these are these, overlapping, functional, specialized, overlapping organizations. Of course, between them there is a permanent competition, and what jurisdiction is concerned, that it's in force and it's in effect for the people, it's a voluntary jurisdiction. That here in this book he has some sub-variants, whether it's mandatory or voluntary. I follow, of course, the voluntary version. So these are more contractual rights and obligations, and not, taking over orders from top down. How this functions within these organizations, there are agreed services, not implemented services. There is a principal voluntariness of membership. You can become a member of this or that organization. You pay not taxes, but a contractual price. You have agreed services that you take from these organizations. So in sum, there is a bottom-up.
Son como estados privados, o sea que distintas cosas especializadas tú las pagas así de forma voluntaria y permite surgimiento de competencia, la membresía voluntaria y todas esas cosas.
Approach, and the power all these power centers, there are many power centers, bigger and smaller, they are delegated power centers. So why not? I'm here on one of this pyramid. That was perhaps in earlier time the state. I became president, but then I had tried to expose this pyramid to competition. So that would be the approach. Starting from this structure, we see here one of these features is no competition, and I think that's the entrance for such a strategy, competition. So to open this very same organization to competition. And once you do it, all the monopolist aspect will disappear. So there will be no territorial monopoly because they can overlap. It's not a frontier here. They can take clients over there and over here. And also this mandatory submission, there too, the principle of competition will be there. So you do not have to be a member. You can be a member of this organization or a client or a customer, but you can withdraw here and go to another one. So this mandatory submission will be replaced by voluntariness. So I think once you open the sidewalls, so to speak, to competition, competition makes the rest. This means that this power over there won't be that arrogant anymore. They will think more client-oriented. This top-down approach won't work anymore, because if you levy taxes and they are higher than the people are voluntarily willing to pay, they leave. And by this, I would say, the state stops being the state. The organization as such is still there. We did not abolish this organization or something like that, but it has changed in the meantime. It's an organization like many other organizations, maybe an efficient one, maybe a less efficient one, maybe one that has big problems to make more efficiency, things like that. It's an organization that once in the past was called state, but in the meantime it's one of these functional, specialized, overlapping, competing jurisdictions. That would be the idea. And now I have 6 minutes left. A little bit more, specific. Let's take the example of education. At the beginning, we have, in this example, a state university. And now come all these competitors in. These are local schools, maybe a whole network of schools, small scholariums somewhere, a private university, and maybe within this competition there is one which is very successful and prominent. Maybe becoming a big university, about Austrian economics, things like that. Education, according to the FOSI system. Infrastructure, we have, let's then take the example of state railways. And we have a lot of competitors at the left and the right. Local area streets, organized cooperatively. Perhaps a network of private automobile users, maybe coming out of a successful automobile business. Intercompany bus, inter-country bus companies. We have maybe a big turnpike incorporated, private airport company, things like that. And maybe here too, maybe one coming out of this automobile business is a very very successful player into this overlapping competition. Let's take another example, law and order, which is sometimes said to be core competence of the state. According to this system, of course, at the beginning we have, for instance, some state police forces. Now, many other competitors being there or coming in, private security services.
O sea, se podría efectivamente hacer eso. O sea, yo tenía una propuesta similar, pero desde antes, o sea, no me refiero desde antes de temporal, sino que hacer como estas módulos, porque yo lo hice como sistema modular, que se encarguen de ciertas cosas y que a través de esos módulos tú le hagas convertirse al estado y los termines reemplazando, ¿no? También sería eso y se podría combinar con una toma del poder y, y aplicar ese mismo sistema de FOSI, ese mismo sistema como un cambio.
Law offices, of course, that too, local or
Perdón, mi pero. Entonces aplicar eso, pues, estas como empresas que presten servicios del Estado, como módulos especializados. Ahí tendría que leer más del tema y aplicarlo. Sería interesante. Ya estoy. Necesito proteger las áreas críticas que son acá. Si pongo uno acá y me faltaría, quedaría esta esquina y la pongo por acá, que eso son las más importantes porque tengo que proteger aquí. Ya, sigamos.
international arbitration services, maybe specialists in consulting of, IP projects, mediation services. And
bueno, acá este tipo habla de propiedad intelectual. Entonces, no sé qué tan entrado en la escuela austríaca esté, pero bueno, igual su propuesta es buena, no hay que negarla. Es bastante buena. Bueno, porque me gustó, obviamente lo voy a encontrar buena.
Maybe let's take that example of this IP project. It's also a very successful competitor in this game. And the last example, money. We have fiat money. Thanks, Thorsten, for the wonderful book, Thorsten, with the money from the devil, fiat money, but there are competitors here too. Gold traders, maybe some specialists in Bitcoin promotion, safe and transport services for precious metals, auditing, banking, and so on. And maybe here too, we have one that is very successful. So this FOSI approach leads us to good friends we have here, these functional, overlapping, competing jurisdictions. So that would be the vision, you know, to approach. Of course, this too is much easier said than done, and many steps have to be done until there. It's about, what I will tell you is about the strategy, you know, how to take the fundamental approach in case you are ready to accept this position of a president of the state. So in a way, it's the function of a liquidator of the state, but in a very specific sense, not to liquidate it as such, but to try to transform it to this concept of foci. Now, two things that should be amended or added in the Constitution, or let's say, let's try to formulate two principles, how to get there, or how can one formulate it as the principle of a state or of a program now introduced. And that would be new constitutional provisions. I think two are sufficient. One is paragraph 1. Nobody, it is no physical person nor any other legal entity, is allowed to exclude anybody from competing with his or its social connections or business activities. This is paragraph 1. This is this principle. This is let coming in competition from all sides. Paragraph 2, now don't be afraid. Paragraph 2, any monopolies traditionally held by the national state, by federal member states, as well as by official communal bodies, are exempt from the rule of paragraph 1. Now, don't leave the hall, because it continues. I thought you cannot do that overnight. If you do it overnight, maybe chaos would come in, chaos would come in. So so at least you should give a timeline. Not to do more than just to open the competition, but let's say where you have these established harmful monopolies of state organizations, do not just take them away overnight, but give a timeline and say by then.
Claro, claro, lo que dice ahí que podrían tomar otros estados ventaja de eso. Imagínate, llega y hace un FOSI, un estado extranjero, y te puede comprar todo y cagaste. Entonces, bueno, mi solución sería hacer los FOSI desde antes y desde ahí comenzar como una revolución.
It will happen, so you are invited to prepare it. But how you do it, but you have to organize, you have perhaps to find investors to come in, things like that. In any event, I would say as a transitory provision, these organizations are included, for instance, until December 31st, 2030, for instance, or whenever you put this line. So with this vision and with this very simple formula, I would say, let me take the job and focus the state. Thank you.
Esta estaba buena, ¿cierto? Bueno, llevo harto rato, así que